When you think of powerful female rulers in Game of Thrones, Daenerys Targaryen is the obvious choice. But in some ways, the most impressive displays of leadership came from no one. Expect Sansa Stark, who went from frightened noble girl to a cunning, shrewd ruler of Winterfell. By the series' end, she had proven herself a capable leader, but still, somehow it just feels like her story didn't have quite the right ending. So what if, instead of taking charge in Winterfell, Sansa led a band of wildlings beyond the wall? Does that make more sense for her character? And if so, how would that look? Let's break it down. And today, let us talk about how Game of Thrones could have ended with Sansa Stark becoming queen beyond the wall. Before we dive into it, I need to ask you all a favor. Game of Thrones may be over, but the love of this amazing fandom certainly isn't. But I want to share that love with others. And the best way you can help me do that is by clicking the subscribe button down below. Thanks so much for helping out. Now, let's get started. As we discussed in our last video about how Joffrey Baratheon became the true king of Westeros, the aftermath of the Long Night left a huge power vacuum in the lands beyond the wall, while the wall itself still stands. The lands north of it are completely without any kind of centralized leadership. Sure, there are plenty of leaders of the various clans of the wildlings, but the area is basically just a war-torn wasteland at this point. And with the White Walkers and their army of the dead now gone, it was up to the survivors to figure out how to rebuild and move forward. That's a tall order for anyone, but someone has to do it. So who better than the one person who really understands the wild mentality? Someone who can lead them not through domination, but through diplomacy and mutual respect. Enter Sansa Stark. In the show, Sansa spends much of her time in the north, learning the intricacies of being a Lady of Winterfell, a role that Jon Snow leaves to her after he inherits the mantle of king in the north. However, this version of Sansa has spent much more time in charge of Winterfell, thanks to being shoved under the rule of Littlefinger and then Ramsay Bolton. Her experiences at the hands of these cruel lords has made Sansa into a strong, hard ruler, someone who knows that kindness doesn't always work, and that sometimes you have to be willing to get your hands dirty. Additionally, while Sansa may be a daughter of winter, she also spent significant time living with and learning from the Umbers at last. Hearth and Hornhall, two houses with strong ties to the free folk. This experience gave her insight into the wildling way of life, something that no other potential ruler of the North has in spades. All of these experiences uniquely prepare Sansa for this task. She knows the history and culture of the North better than almost anyone, and she's proven herself willing to do whatever it takes to protect her people. And since she's a Stark, she won't be afraid to get her hands dirty while ruling. Now, once word gets around that Jon Snow is officially the king of a very much independent North, there's bound to be backlash. Sansa likely would have been his choice to rule in his place, but it seems unlikely she'd actually want that job. She got a taste of it when Jon left for Eastwatch, and she found that she enjoyed her freedom a lot more than being saddled with the duties of lady. Still, given her strong connection to the North, she probably wouldn't leave it to just anyone. Instead, Sansa would take a page out of her brother Essos' book and declare herself queen of a very much independent set of lands north of the North. Now, it's important to remember that when Jon took on the role of king in the North, he wasn't necessarily ruling the entire region. The North as a whole was only unified because of the threat posed by the Lannisters and the Boltons. Now that the White Walkers are gone, there will surely be tensions as various houses vie for power and independence. Sansa knows this and realizes that her rule won't be accepted overnight. She can use her knowledge of the region and its inhabitants to play these factions against each other and eventually win them over. At first, she'll likely have to rely on diplomacy and negotiation rather than dominance. After all, she's not known for her martial prowess, and frankly, there's not much of an army to command. Yes, there are the Night's Watch, but they re-stretched a little thin considering the number of castles along the wall that still need to be repaired. On top of that, most of them are still mourning the loss of their brothers and sisters who died during the battle against the army of the dead. Sansa would likely offer them positions within her court, perhaps as her guard, but she'd need to earn their loyalty first. Instead, she'll turn to the one group of people who already know how to survive in this untamed land, the wildlings. Sansa has spent considerable time among the free folk and has proven that she's willing to bend her morals in order to ensure survival, as seen in her decision to flee with Theon, Greyjoy, and Pip after they were captured by the Boltons. In fact, her time with the free folk prepared her for her eventual rise to power in the north. When Mance Rayder was in charge of the wildlings, he too tried to unite the clans under one banner. But his hardline approach of demanding submission often backfired, leading to open rebellions. Sansa, on the other hand, understood that in order to unite the free folk, she would need to earn their respect and trust, not dominate them through fear. She could learn much from Mance's mistakes, especially when it came to the various wildling clans. Even though they are all technically free, they don't necessarily see eye to eye on everything. Just because someone lives beyond the wall doesn't mean they agree on every issue. There are bound to be conflicts even after the defeat of the White Walkers. Maybe a dispute over hunting grounds or trading rights, or even who gets to decide who becomes queen. Sansa knows this and would go out of her way to address these issues as quickly as possible. Of course, the biggest challenge facing the people beyond the wall right now is survival. The long night devastated the population, and the coming winter will likely take even more lives, unless there's food and resources to sustain everyone. While the wildlings know how to hunt, fish, and live off the land, they don't know how to farm. And given the destruction wrought by the Whites, it's unlikely that many of the old farming communities are still standing. Sansa, however, does know how to farm. After all, she was in charge of Winterfell's kitchens for most of her time there. She could use her experience to help the free folk become more self-sufficient, which would ensure that they could defend themselves against any future threats. The other major problem facing the people beyond the wall is disease. With limited medical supplies and a lack of sanitation, it's easy for illness to spread and claim lives. Again, Sansa could use her time in charge of Winterfell to her advantage here, as she worked closely with Maester Luwin to care for the sick and wounded. She could teach the locals basic medical practices, such as how to properly care for wounds and how to prevent the spread of disease. But what about the Northerners who are close to Sansa? Would they support her decision to leave the region? Well, her family would surely understand. Tyrion Lannister once said that a queen needs a good queen's justice, meaning that if a queen's advisor is trying to undermine her, they should be beheaded. But that saying works both ways. If a queen has a good queen's justice, that means her advisors are working for the good of the realm. We saw this firsthand when Sansa was able to negotiate a peace deal between the Umbers and the Mormonts, two families who had been feuding for years. She also brokered a deal between House Glover and House Reed, proving that she has a knack for diplomacy and bringing people together. She could do the same for the North and its free folk. Jon Snow would likely be her greatest champion, not only because he loves his sister, but also because he understands the importance of the free folk. He knows that they are valuable allies against any future threats and that they deserve to be treated with respect. Bran the Broken would probably be a bit more hesitant, but ultimately supportive. As the Three-Eyed Raven, he sees the bigger picture and understands that Sansa's rule could bring stability and prosperity to the entire region. Even Arya might come around eventually. While she's fiercely independent, she's also fiercely loyal to her family. She might grumble about having to stay put and listen to her sister boss her around. But she'd never let anything happen to Sansa intentionally. With her family and most of the influential North houses behind her, Sansa could finally start to focus on ruling the free folk. She would continue to meet with clan leaders, mediating disputes and working to forge alliances. She would also spend time with the people, learning about their culture and traditions and listening to their concerns. Slowly but surely, she would earn their respect and admiration. Now, Sansa's rule would hardly be without its challenges, though. There would always be people who opposed her authority. either because they didn't like the idea of a southern queen, or because they wanted more power for themselves. But Sansa would handle these challenges with grace and determination, always putting the needs of her people first. She would prove to be a wise and compassionate ruler, one who cared deeply for her subjects and wanted the best for them. And as time went on, she would win over even her most ardent critics. Yes, Sansa's story had a happy ending in the original canon. But I believe that her journey to become the Queen Beyond the Wall would have been a greater triumph for the character overall. What do you all think? Could Sansa have pulled it off? Would her family and the Northerners at large accept this decision? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. And while you're at it, don't forget to click that subscribe button so you never miss another video from us. Thanks so much for watching. Stay safe and enjoy the rest of your day.